Hello, everyone. Welcome to Binkhorsts and Blockbusters. This is Cait,
And I'm Gerrit.
and today we are starting our War on Christmas.
Yes, we're starting with Steven Spielberg Saving Private Ryan.
So, if you're new here, we are a brother sister team, and we review movies and television. And this holiday season, we are reviewing war movies. Starting with probably like my first big war movie that I watched many times and at a young age. We'll get into it.
Yeah, this is one I've seen a lot of parts of, but I think this was the first time I sat down and watched the whole thing. Um,
Really? Wow. Okay.
yeah, I can't really think of my version of this where there's like the war movie that I watched.
Huh.
Which is weird because usually these sort of like war media attracts men and kids. Like I had a bunch of friends when I was growing up that played with like the army dudes and guns and stuff, but that really wasn't in our household. They're like the GI Joe guys. I This stuff didn't appeal to me that much as a kid.
No,
uh,
you were more of a Cars kid.
I like machines. that's
Yeah.
that's my masculine trait. I like machines. I don't like violence.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today too because I was like, why is it that I enjoy war movies so much? Because I do. And I think that a lot of it is it's something I watched with my dad. So like dad and I would watch war movies a lot. But I think that there's also going back to Titanic, like Caitlin likes ships, Caitlin likes trains, Caitlin likes tanks. So there is certainly an element of those kinds of things that I really enjoy about these movies, and maneuvers and all of that is fun and interesting. But the blood and gore, as the older I get, the harder it is to watch.
Really? I mean, I thought this was really intense with a lot of those things. Kind of surprised that this came out, in the late 90s. It seemed a little bit more of like what you would think of now when you see like movies and stuff, because they go up to 11. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, but I think that that's something that's interesting about war movies is that even much older war movies turn it up to 11 too.
right.
And a lot of them have to use more practical effects, and they also don't use a lot of the things we talked about in The Thing to make that, gory. All those things are, distasteful when you're talking about real life events that happen to real people and veterans who are maybe watching. So it's like sometimes it's more tasteful gore, but it's certainly not, as clean as, a nice, happy, sappy movie can be. So, nor
That's
should it
true.
be. I mean, this
The,
is war.
yeah, this movie really painted one of the most realistic depictions of war that most people had seen on film. And
Hmm.
we'll get into more of the how and why they did that. But first,
What's on TV?
so I've been watching some stuff on HBO. And remember last week when I said I was watching something even more stressful and heavier?
Yeah.
Well, I finished it. So HBO does like these little docu-series, and they did this one about this woman, Renee Bach, who goes to Uganda and opens up, she's like a Christian missionary of some denomination. And she opens up like a feeding place where these children can come and get food. And then that kind of turns into this health facility to like help the malnourished children. Um, and there's a lot of discussion in it about like the responsibility that these Christian missionaries play in Uganda and in their like role and what they're doing. They talk about this group, No White Saviors, that exemplifies a lot of the like bad people that come over here in an effort to do good, but really just make a bigger mess. Like Renee, who the documentary is about. Um, There's also this legal element of a lawyer who's trying to like build a case against her because she's illegally and without like license or training practicing medicine.
Mhm.
Uh, Whether or not it's told from a variety of perspectives that almost gets you to question like how much was actually going on, what was going on. And I guess that's kind of the point. They try to paint a pretty broad picture. But it was really disturbing to watch. It was a very difficult one to watch. It was very gross. Mostly in like that these people exist and don't realize like the wrong that they're doing. But very interesting, a very bleak look at a part of the world you don't think about.
Yeah, that sounds really really interesting, and something I will definitely put on the list. Sadly, my TV watching has not been a lot lately. Last week I couldn't remember that I had binge watched a whole season, and this week I can't remember, and I don't know if I binge watched a whole season. So here we go. It's about to be a busy time of the year for me, so it's
Yes,
on the list though.
so I'll carry the what's on TV segments because I don't do anything. Also, this week, season 2 of the Gilded Age started.
Cool. I watched season one last year, and despite not having any advertising or anything to let me know this is on, I do know that it was on and new and released because somebody at work is also watching it and asking me if I've watched it, which I have not.
Okay, well, I was going to make the claim that you didn't even know it was coming out.
Nope, thankfully, I do have people in my life to remind me via word of mouth, but that's about it. And it's too bad because season one was a really good show. Now, have you watched it?
Yes, yes, I watched season 1 and I watched the first episode of season 2.
Cool. I
Um,
am hoping for more trains in season two, especially as I have become obsessed with trains. Also, more Philadelphia would also be nice, just saying.
there's a new plot line with the train barons that starts briefly in the first episode where there are a bunch of unions trying to get together and have a better life, and the train barons try to put a stop to it.
Cool. Well, we
Yeah,
are pro union on this podcast, so
yeah, but
let's cheer
also
for
pro
them.
train.
Yeah, yeah, pro train. But I mean, like, remember, this is the dawn of bad trains. Because,
Yes.
there is a very short period where everything about trains in America was good, and then it went downhill fast.
Hmm.
And we've never really, gone back to goodness when it comes to trains, but, you know, they're better than cars, and they always will be. So.
Yes. But anyway, this is a really good show about people living in this time period. It's called the Gilded Age. Um, I like all the costumes. I think they're a lot of fun. Everybody has on these silly hats.
Those aren't just those aren't silly hats. Those are great hats. Those are normal hats. Those are
Yeah,
everyday hats.
but to me in a 2023 brain, they're silly hats. But
Man, if I could live in 1890s Philadelphia and wear those silly hats every day and have like furniture that had inlaid mother of pearl spider webs in them and like full wood paneling and mosaic floor tiles, and yeah, I would love that. I belong in 1890s Philadelphia, which is
this
not
is
in this show either. So.
this, this is very much the same train of thought that men have about being Roman centurions, and really you'd probably just be a one of the people that's a maid in one of these nice houses if you're that lucky.
Gerrit, you underestimate my charm.
Okay, yeah, maybe I do.
And skills. Like, I am an excellent craftsperson. I am sure I could have, weaseled my way through Philadelphia society somehow to be not a servant.
Well, we do both know how to read and write, so
This is
you
true.
know we're
But
up
so
there.
did most people in Philadelphia in the 1890s.
Ooh,
We was not an illiterate clan of,
right.
you know.
Well, I'm certain I could outsludge even the best of them with my skills of making pies and sludges and cheese stuff.
Yeah, and then give everybody typhoid too.
Yeah, why not? Two for one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay,
yeah, so
let's move on.
that's what's been on TV. We'll find something, some more stuff to talk about next week. But now we go on to Saving Private Ryan. This film came out in 1998. At this point, I was not even a year old, and Cait was 8 when she was watching The Horror as Men Face the Slaughter on Omaha Beach.
Yeah, I very distinctly remember like Dad rented this movie and he didn't rent it from Blockbusters because we lived in a small enough town that we had our own local movie rental store, and he rented it on VHS tape because this is 1990. It was probably 99 by then
Yeah,
because, it came out on video.
yeah, in
And
May of '99.
I remember very distinctly about a half an hour into the movie, he turns to me because he's sitting on the couch and I'm in the chair, and he's like, Cait, I'm not sure you should watch this movie. And I don't know if it was because mom said something or like I mean maybe, like he saw, everything that happens in the first half an hour of that movie and was like, I don't think Cait should see this, but I do remember it. And I mean, very shortly, I did stop watching the movie at that point. But I definitely watched it, within a year or so. The whole of it. Maybe a couple years.
I mean, the first half an hour is the worst part.
It
I mean,
is.
not the worst isn't bad. It's amazing, but in terms of like exposing something to a child, every other part in the movie would be better.
Yeah, but I'd already watched Titanic in theaters at this point, so.
Right.
And, I'm sure that we had actually, because didn't Armageddon come out at the same time?
Yes. So Armageddon came out this year, and it went to be the number one at the box office for the year. And it was Steven Spielberg was worried that this movie wouldn't succeed because of the blockbuster like Armageddon that came out that year.
Well, and
Um,
so I think that, part of this was we had watched Armageddon already that weekend. Because usually when we rented movies, we rented more than one. We
yeah, of
watched
course.
like, we rented like a couple for to watch over the weekend. And I think that this was the second movie then. And so I'd probably watched all of Armageddon as well, which I loved like as a kid. I loved watching Armageddon. So who knows?
Yeah, 1999 was an interesting year for movies. Also coming out that year was Godzilla, which growing up was one that I watched a lot with my friends. A Bug's Life and Mulan were some animated movies that came out. And this is interesting. Winning Best Picture that year was Shakespeare in Love, which in 2015 there was a poll of like the Academy voters on who should have won this poll, and they were all like, "Yeah, we probably should have given the best picture to Saving Private Ryan."
Yeah, I mean, I remember Shakespeare in Love being like one of those cult movies that like everybody in my high school liked, and I was just like, what are you guys talking about? Saving Private Ryan is the thing. I didn't say that, but uh yeah, I never understood that. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah. This film went on to win a bunch of awards anyway. Steven Spielberg won many Best Director credits. It won many for sound, filmography, and score, which was done by John Williams. Um, and Tom Hanks won an award for the Best Lead Actor in a film, which
Yeah.
is well deserved. I think he does a
Yeah,
really good
yeah.
job.
he really performs as a leader in this one, and I mean he's a great actor, and his character is not flat. He makes it that way too. It couldn't have, I mean, it could have been done by somebody else, but he does make it his own while still fitting into this, like, kind of like bland army guy, like look, because sometimes the leads in these movies, like I'm thinking about Ben Affleck in Pearl Harbor, um they have too much, they don't have enough everyman in them, and they're
Right.
too much like a hot, Ben Affleck guy, with his Liv Tyler girlfriend. But Tom Hanks is very much an everyman, and I think that that is really good for this film.
Yeah, I think he does a great job. Um, so we mentioned this was a Steven Spielberg movie. He was brought on to direct because Tom Hanks was approached with this script, and Tom Hanks and Spielberg had worked on other things in the past, and they wanted to work together again. You might remember in 1993, Steven Spielberg made a little movie called Schindler's List. So this would be
Small
his.
movie,
Li,
very
li,
short.
I'm amazed if any of our viewers would even know about it.
I mean, that's I thought we weren't getting political, Garrett.
No, that was a joke. It's probably
I
one
know.
of the most famous World War II Holocaust centric movies that's out there.
Yeah,
Uh,
which is interesting because despite having watched this one so many times and watching a myriad of other World War II movies many times, which I'm sure we're going to review over time, I didn't see Schindler's List until probably 2018.
I don't think I've ever seen the whole thing.
No,
No, it's
it's
one of those you kind of absorb through like cultural osmosis.
that's true. And I mean it's a very hard movie to watch, but definitely worth the binge, of like just taking it in emotionally. The other one that's very similar is The Pianist.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
that
and
that's one I've
those
watched a bunch.
yeah, those definitely exist in my mind. But those are different kinds of World War II movies. Those are
Yes,
World War II movies about civilians and the Holocaust. This is World War II movie that is absolutely just about war. Civilians do not matter in this film. Um, it's all about the battles.
yes, and to give all of the actors, the cast, kind of an understanding of what was going on. They went through a week-long military training course where several of them wanted to like drop out, but Tom Hanks was like, "No, we're doing this. You're gonna really value what this turns your acting into." Which in some ways I think, okay, good. Like they at least can perform a little bit better, but also I think that's it's kind of a weird approach. It's in that like style of getting really into your role that I think can be really cringy, but it doesn't come off like that in this film.
No, and I think it's important to, uh, because like when the movie begins, we start the movie with them on the boat. So they've gone through their training. This is a group of highly skilled rangers who have been together for X amount of time. They've been training together, and all of the soldiers, even the, non-skilled rangers, had been preparing for this moment for a long time.
Mm.
So there's a sense of camaraderie and stuff that comes with that preparation. Um, and that, I think, going through that with your, fellow, actors can make the, I think that's one of the things that makes the like team work together really well in the movie. And there's other things that are really important, like how to hold a gun, who to
Yeah,
salute, like how to wear your clothes, that they would have learned in this boot camp kind of a thing. That is really important because these are not things that necessarily come naturally to, a 1997 bunch of Hollywood actors who get paid lots of money and, you know, go to parties with.
Yeah, especially this group. Tom Hanks and Spielberg cut a deal to win out some of the money that the film would end up making to the tune of 35 cents on the dollar, which is just an insane thing to think about when they made 482 million at the box office, and then in the first 3 months of it being released, another 44 million. It was the best-selling rental, best-selling VHS there's basically ever been at the time.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean,
Well, so
it's a
so
really good movie.
this is one that definitely was helped by the word of mouth. So many people who went to see it had like really visceral reactions to it.
Hmm.
And we'll be talking a little bit more about that through our next series of slides.
Yeah, so they start the movie by storming the beach, which went better than they thought it would.
Yeah, it's a very bleak scene of a part of the storming of Omaha Beach on June 6th, 1944. On that day, 2,400 people died, at least. Um,
Yeah. And for the record, that's more than died on the Titanic. And also 9/11.
yeah, this was a bleak day, but a very important one that turned the tide of war in human history forever. So, good job, everyone. Uh,
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I mean, it ultimately was successful. Um, but yeah, it was a rough idea, bad idea. Germans weren't expecting it because it was such a bad idea. But yeah,
to shoot this scene, they hired a bunch of people and read through a bunch of like excerpts and what people had written, listened to a lot of testimonials. This was filmed over the course of a 6-week period and cost $12 million, which was a big chunk of the budget. Um, they scouted around a lot of places in France to shoot this because it was in France, but there was nowhere that was like available or useful or that they could really get. And Steven Spielberg talked with other people, and they decided to film it on a beach in Ireland. And a lot of the over 1,000 extras that were used in this scene or in this set of scenes were from the Ireland's military, their army. So that added another level of authenticity to it. They did a lot of research into all the different sounds and the guns and the explosions. And people who were there or had a lot of experience were like, you guys need to tone down how big the explosions are. They weren't like that. They were more like this, uh, which gives this film a much more grounded and realistic sense rather than a lot of the other like big action movies where like it doesn't matter what the explosion is, it's a fury of hellfire and it's cool and badass.
yeah. When I was researching this today, I read something about how the flamethrowers in this scene were actually not were probably not used at all because they were either tossed in the ocean initially or, just didn't, they just didn't use them. So even things like that they did use to show, these kind of, explosive effects were not necessarily accurate. But on the other hand, like the sounds, when you mentioned the score earlier, this is one of those movies where the music and the score is so like background and you don't notice it, but what you do notice is the sound. And especially in this scene, the way that they portray the shell shock where the sound goes out and you hear just the tinnitus and the ringing. That I think that is phenomenal. Thankfully, I've
Absolutely.
never, been near a explosion like this, so I don't know how it really feels. But I assume that they consulted somebody on this and that that's a accurate representation, and you see it later on in a lot of other World War II films.
Yeah, it almost becomes a trope in a lot of like battle things of but I have no doubt that the trope exists because that's exactly how it feels.
Yeah.
So this was considered the most real depiction of the event. Previously, in a lot of the other like World War II films, you never saw combat or anything quite so visceral. They always took a very heroic approach of, guys storming in and kicking ass or, just looking heroic. There really wasn't this depiction of the accuracy of the massive slaughter. Shortly after this film was released, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs they set up a hotline for your phone that you could call into explicitly for people to call in about the experiences they had with this film to help them deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. It wasn't just people who were in World War II that could have been affected by like the visuals and the feelings in this. It was anybody from Korea, Vietnam, any other conflicts we were into.
Yeah, yeah, and that totally makes sense. And when we're thinking about all the explosions and stuff, a lot of the movies that I was thinking about was like Apocalypse Now
Hmm.
and like even Full Metal Jacket was before this. And those are Vietnam movies. But yeah, yeah, it's just a totally different take on it, and the way that they portray the just like brutal sacrifice of soldiers on this beach is just horrifying. Like just the variety of different deaths. I mean, it wasn't like they're just being shot. It's that they're drowning, they're hurting each other, they're using bodies as shields at some points, having to hide behind certain things on the beach, the flamethrower tank being shot and catching fire, and those kinds of just absolutely horrifying things. And then you have the scenes, I think, which are just pivotal in this movie, of the doctor continually trying to help people, and just like the very, like, I remember vividly the scene where he's trying to help somebody and he's almost got it, and then the guy gets shot in the head, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So it's just it's those moments in this film, which like, they're so disturbing and they're so visceral. The other one that I can think of is the guy who was on the radio, and he turns to him to like give him a new order, and he finds out he's dead. um so I mean, those scenes just like happen again and again and again, over the course of 30 minutes. And at the end, it kind of fades to music while you see like a river of blood running down the beach.
Oh
And
yeah, just a
that's,
tide.
yeah, it's powerful. And that's how it was. And honestly, we're lucky that we made it through, and we're able to you know um take the beach so that we could gather the wounded and dead, um because there are other battles in this war where those people could have been there for a while.
Yeah,
Dark.
very bleak. Um,
Hmm.
So a couple more things about, especially this opening scene. They achieved a lot of the effects, or not a lot of the effects, but they achieved some of the effects by having people who were amputees, had these problems, so that way they could have prosthetics. And there's a scene I vividly remember of a guy hunting around for his blown off arm and picking it up and hobbling around. So,
Hmm.
so scenes like that, that's how they did it. Similar to what they did in The Thing, which I'm glad you brought up earlier. Um, this film, and especially this scene and like this depiction of World War II, is something that brought back a lot of World War II media, which is something we'll talk about at the end. Um, previously, a lot of the war movies were about Vietnam because that was the biggest conflict and it was awful and shit and a losing battle. And so many of the films at the time, like you mentioned, Apocalypse Now, Full Metal Jacket, really, showed off the that war, and especially in a negative light, or at least with a negative connotation. This was the start of bringing back like a heroicness to the Hollywood movies and to the uh, military propaganda machine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, it worked too. And I think that, it's going back to a movie where, or a movie, a time in history where, we can easily define the good and the bad guys. Um,
Right.
and I think that, especially in the, 98, we're 6 years after the Berlin Wall. So, communism is dead. Long live capitalism in the United States. Um, so, it is a great moment to harken back to. It's like, look at America back to back World War victors, as we try to gain that footing again in the late 90s.
Yeah, there was a lot of patriotism about this film. In several critics tried to criticize it because it overplays like the American aspect, like there's no British or French or any other Allied troops in this film, but this exists to be like wholly American. Like this
Hmm.
is the American war story. It is specifically about trying to save the last person in this American family.
Right.
It
And
has a lot of those traditional American values to it.
yeah, and they do that, so they emphasize that so much when they go to the mom's house and you see the American flag in the window, you see the
Hmm.
cornfields, you see the wallpaper, even the dress she is wearing is so stereotypical American Midwestern housewife, like I can't think of a more stereotypical image of what was the ideal American woman at home during the war than that scene.
That scene was also shot in Ireland. They,
Well,
they they built a fake house. They they
I
could
thought so. The
they
thing that
couldn't
bothered
find a
me,
house in America, in rural America with the cornfield.
the thing that bothered me, Garrett, and I agree with them not being able to find one, is because it was too hilly.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
And
I mean,
so to have that shot where she's looking out the window and seeing the car coming, like, yeah, I was just like, where in America could this be? I mean, even for like, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, it's too hilly for that. Like,
well, yeah, and they say Matt Damon's from Iowa, so like Iowa
yeah.
Iowa has bigger rolling hills that go on
Hmm.
forever, but yeah, that you could have found a farmhouse, Steven Spielberg. You could have found one. It wouldn't have been
Yeah,
hard.
they should have filmed it in Iowa for sure because the flat plane, you could have gotten a similar shot on a flat plane with the the corn, similar to Twister,
Yes.
uh but and it would have given me the American moment in the same way. But yeah, this is a total nitpick, but I did think that, and like the Midwestern in me is like, that ain't flawed enough. Nope. And this is not the first time I've thought this while watching a movie about something
Correct.
set in the Midwest.
Correct.
Ah,
Uh,
yeah.
so
We know where we're from.
yes, never forget. So after they storm the beaches of Normandy, Tom Hanks is left with a crew of many people who are left, and they're established with a new operation: go find and save Matt Damon. Uh, so growing up, I always thought like, because I'd heard of this movie and I understood the plot, I always thought that like this idea that like you go into a war zone and you're like, okay, we're relieving one guy of duty because like the rest of his brothers or family are dead. I thought that was like really fanciful, and I thought that that was like, oh, they're trying to have like a not necessarily feel good, but like an inspiring story to tell here.
Yeah. And I mean, I think people in the movie do a good job of, disbelieving that this is something that's happening as well.
Yes, there are many points where they're just looking for excuses to give up because they don't want to go and find this guy. They want to keep fighting the battles and win the war. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so this plot point is based off of the sole survivor policy, which came into effect in American military rules in 1948. So this was several years after the events of the film that this came about, but previously it was something that they had done, and then it just became an official policy. So the main policy protects members of your family from the draft or dangerous circumstances if you're the only surviving heir to your family, and then later towards the Korea and Vietnam eras, if like your family member, like your parents or something, had died or died of injuries sustained during the war, you were exempt from service. Um, During World War II, the Borgstrom family petitioned for their fifth son to be taken out of combat after their other four children had died in combat, and their sixth son was then exempt from service. Back then people had much bigger families than they do now, but the idea of losing, a child is unthinkable, and the idea of losing nearly all of them to the industrial war machine is horrifying.
Yeah, and so I'm reading your notes here. The Ford brothers died on a boat together.
No, this is a different group. In
Oh, okay.
1942, four Sullivan brothers died, and that was basically, the whole family line there in the sinking of the USS Genoa.
Yeah, and I think that's Juno, Garrett.
Juno?
Um yeah. I think
Well, that makes more sense.
yeah, it's French. I think they mentioned this in the thing is that they had all gone to basic together and then they had been split up because they didn't because of a prior incident and
Hmm.
where brothers died. And I
Yeah,
think that that's a really good point is that if and this I think about this a lot with like boats, like everybody on the boat, like you're relatively safe on a boat until it sinks and
right.
then you're not safe at all. And if a boat sinks, everybody's going to die is generally the way it goes. So having everybody in a family together on a boat is probably a bad idea. Um, and I thought that that was an interesting moment in the film and an idea that because I know that they would try and like, especially during World War II, they would try and keep local people together because it added a sense of community if you knew each other and you knew things back home. So they did that with like families too, because like if you're with people from your community, then you're going to be related to some of them.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that was interesting, an interesting fact, and yeah, but I think the bottom line is that not everybody watching this movie, because some people are sympathetic and have hearts and are bigger hearts than us at least. They're sympathetic to this plot, but most people either watching the movie and the people in the movie are disbelieving that this is a mission that we have to, waste valuable resources on.
yeah. One of the consultants for the film said something along the lines of they probably wouldn't have sent it 8 people, but due to the specifics and probably not being able to easily find Matt Damon since he parachuted in, it could have happened.
Hmm.
In later wars, this does happen. They send people in when their other members of their family die, but there is a stipulation that exists where you can say no, I'm going to continue serving, and it's basically just hey, I don't want to be relieved of duty, or I'm going to finish this tour or whatever, um, which wasn't really seen as an option in this film for Matt Damon's character. But I think because that happened in a later conflict, that was one of the things added that would have not been a part of this policy when the movie was drafted.
Right. And well, I had the assumption, for no particular reason other than like understanding the military industrial complex, that while he would be taken out of, France, probably, he would probably still stay in the army and do, like stuff, in England or, back in America. I mean, there was plenty of things for people to do without like getting
Right.
like actively shot at.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, and we're told how much every person in America, in Great Britain, everywhere, was a part in some way of the war effort. So no
Hmm.
doubt he wouldn't have just gone home and, been munching on corn on the cob.
Yeah. Which is
Uh,
too bad because corn on the cob is delicious.
yes, and if it's from the Midwest, it's the best corn. Nowhere else
Hmm.
has good corn. I'll fight you on that, but
Yeah,
you'll
especially like the
lose.
first week of August. Yeah.
So we can talk a little bit about the team. So the cast is just full of stars, people who would go on to become stars and have big careers. We've mentioned before Tom Hanks. He is our captain guy. Uh, Also considered for this role was Mel Gibson and Harrison Ford, but Tom Hanks being approached first, he got the role.
Yeah, and I think he's the best out of that group. I think Harrison Ford would have even been a little too old at that point, and then Mel Gibson turned into an awful human being at some point in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I because Harrison Ford has a scene in Apocalypse Now where he's just like, one of these like army officer dudes. And I feel like he would have, he can play that role better, especially at this point in the 90s of being like a bit more in the higher command, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um so in a similar way to Ted Danson, who plays another person that's in a higher command or higher
Yeah.
than or equal to Tom Hanks, and he's in here. Um, Opposite Tom Hanks is Tom Sizemore, who's a sergeant, and he's dedicated. He's his right hand man. He never really backs down. We have a bunch of like typical grunts, including Vin Diesel, who before this film was working as a telemarketer, but Steven Spielberg was impressed with some of his early work, so hired him on.
Yeah, I totally forgot Vin Diesel was in this one. And so I was like, surprise, Vin Diesel. And then later on, when what happens to Vin Diesel's character, I was like, oh man, surprise, Vin Diesel.
Yeah, I never knew he was in this one. I was surprised. And this is 30 years old at this point. Well, not exactly, but close
That's
to.
true.
Uh,
But this would have been either right before or right after he starts doing the Chronicles of Riddick movies.
This would have been before. So this is a film that really propelled a lot of
Yeah.
these stars forward, particularly him and then Matt Damon, who in the year before was in Good Will Hunting, and then this was like he's in a blockbuster role. He's Matt Damon becomes the everyman after this.
Yeah, so they would have filmed Pitch Black right after this, because I knew it was filmed in the 90s, so I'm like,
Yeah,
wow, they're running out of time. Yeah, and of course Matt Damon.
yeah. So we also have a character in this film that is kind of our stand-in as being someone who is untrained, has a very by the books approach, is not a murderer, and that's uh, Private Upham. And he does some questionable things in the course of this movie, but everybody does questionable things, which
Yeah.
leads us into our next slide.
Yeah, the bad guys do not understand English, and that's why they had to get. I think it's Corporal up him, by the way. I think he's a corporal.
Okay, that makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, so they have to get somebody to be able to translate to be on their team because they assume they're going to interact with French and German folks. And he also is a map guy, so that's good. But so there is some really interesting themes in this movie about the bad guys, because it's a World War II movie where the Americans were clearly the good guys, and the bad guys are shooting at us, and that makes them bad. But we do have several scenes in this movie where they do try very hard to make the Germans more relatable. And by Germans, I mean people part of the German army who very clearly some of them aren't German. so in the scene right after Normandy, or when they're starting to, you know, win, these the two people on the screen surrender, and the subtitles on the screen say that they're speaking Czech. They're not even speaking German.
Yeah.
And you know, it's important to recognize, especially at the, you know, this whole area of France, you know, Germany at this point has to occupy a huge amount of land. There is so much area that they have to defend. And, you know, at this point in the war, it's gone on for a long time. Not everyone that's in the army is very good or wants to be there
Hmm.
or is of a good fighting age or is German at all. A lot of people were conscripted. There was a lot of ethnic Germans who, you know, like these folks were Czech, and were from different, you know, areas. You know, like imagine being a conscripted ethnic German from Czechoslovakia who's stationed on the top of a cliff in Normandy, which, by the way, very beautiful, but not the most pleasant place in France to hang out for long periods of time.
Right.
um you know, yeah, and then you have all these Americans who do this thing that is completely unpredicted and really dumb. You see all of them dying in front of you and you are not prepared for that, and when you finally get overwhelmed and you surrender, they shoot you.
Yeah. So this is kind of the start of us questioning, not necessarily questioning who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, but understanding this like area of these people understandably want revenge or want justice, and murder is a means to that. Whereas taking these people prisoner is the legally correct thing to do.
Right, but it's
We,
not always the most practical thing to do.
correct, which we see play out a couple more times in this movie with
Yeah.
Germans who become prisoners and then are released because they don't have the capacity to, handle them at the time. Um, we see like kind of like makeshift tribunals about to occur. It's
Hmm.
it's pretty bleak, but it gives us some conflict within the main cast of characters and some kind of added drama. In a lot of war movies, it can be hard to get outside of the, very simplistic drama of good guys versus bad guys. But this offers, at the very least, some like thinking questions.
Hmm. Yeah, and we see that these guys are clearly not German. Later on, the guy is clearly German, and you know, but at the same time, he tries to ingratiate himself with them by, you know, reciting, you know, snippets from American cartoons and movies, that he had access to, like Betty Boop and, you know, other
Steamboat
things in order
Willie.
to, yeah, in order to, you know, show that he's human and be relatable. And I think that that's something that we often forget when we talk about Nazis and you know, World War II, is that the people on the ground are humans, you know, regardless of what else is going on. And yes, they're doing terrible things, but you know, the good guys are doing terrible things too. And in the end, you know, these are a bunch of 19-year-olds with weapons who, you know, are probably hungry and wet and tired.
Yeah. So much of this film is just centered around people who have a will to survive and it
Hmm.
being, in several instances, taken advantage of and just, I don't know where I'm going with that train of thought.
Yeah, well, and there's also, you know, a lot of revenge plots too. You know, the whole
Yes.
reason that they go after the is it's like a communication base where that scene is with the German and the Steamboat Willie.
Yes.
But the whole
So,
reason that they do that is because like they were filled with anger and visceral anger at one of their comrades, Vin Diesel, being shot and killed. So they want to kill Germans. all of a sudden. They want to get that revenge.
Right. And at this point in the film, they're starting to get really upset about having to go on this quest to find Matt Damon because they're like, this isn't helping our cause. This is just helping one guy. So by doing this little mission to take this like comms base, that will, is almost seen as like this will be a morale boost because we can steamroll them. Which isn't the case. They lose one of their guys. They lose their medic, um, and it's pretty morale breaking for everyone that's there. Really has the
Yeah.
opposite effect. And it's one of the first instances where members of the company start to question Tom Hanks's leadership and who he is and how he's gotten so far. And it's also has the scene where Tom Hanks opens up about who he is and kind of like what it means and about every person you kill takes him further away from home, takes him further away from his humanity, which is a good theme for them to touch on that gets really muddled at the end.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that is absolutely true. And that is such a great scene where he uses that, so throughout the film they joke about that they have a betting pool on, who can guess what kind of job he had outside of the army. And, he knows about it. So he uses that and tells them in order to stop them from, like beating the crap out of each other and going nuts. Because it breaks the tension of that moment in the group.
Mhm.
But I don't know if they lose that much respect for him. I think that it's more of a gain in that situation.
Yeah, no, I don't think they lose respect for him in that way. I think if anything, they probably gain it because they've more so realized the seriousness of why it matters who he was before.
Hmm.
Because it shows, the humanity. We don't get a lot of that from a lot of the characters. Um, one example that we do get, which is a through line through the film, is Vin Diesel has a letter he wants to like send his dad, and as when he dies, somebody picks it up, retranscribes it. When that guy dies, another person picks it up. It's this effort to keep it going to, you know, get everyone home in a sense to have that closure. Um,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah, and that is so much a part of this movie is this, this community, this brotherhood, this team. It's such an important part of their existence, and what they're doing and what they believe in and how they work together, in that they don't question orders beyond, like there's a conversation before they storm that communications base, but then that's the end. There's like, nope, the boss says we're doing it, and they do it, despite their reservations.
yes, and shortly afterwards, they come across a field. They've found our Matt Damon.
Yeah, surprise Matt Damon.
Yeah,
The best kind of Matt Damon, really.
yes, in several films, we have been surprised by Matt Damon. We talked
And
about it
this one,
in our Interstellar review.
yeah. Yeah, and in this one, like I mean, the way that he's revealed is so slow, even though we're all expecting it. It is such a slow secret reveal too. And he also doesn't they don't give him like they give Tom Hanks the star, stage and the star lighting throughout
Mhm.
the film. But they don't give it to Matt Damon, and especially not in this moment. They do kind of when they're talking about, like what happened to his family and what he's gonna do and how he gets to go home. But other than that, he doesn't get any special treatment.
In a lot of like action movies, especially, you would assume that Matt Damon would have like some action scene where he's like dual wielding machine guns mowing down people, but
Hmm.
he doesn't really get anything even close to that. A lot of our other characters end up getting those scenes of like a moment of heroics or like a moment of survival. but Matt Damon's
Hmm.
just sort of there. Um,
Yeah.
Matt Damon was brought on after Steven Spielberg went to the set of Good Will Hunting in 1997, and Robin Williams said good things about Matt Damon, and that's how he got involved. It's all about who you know, and if
Hmm.
Robin Williams can say good things about you, you're probably a pretty damn good guy.
Truth. Yeah, so how did you feel about the about Matt Damon's reaction to being told that, his brothers were dead and he gets a free ticket home?
So earlier in the movie, we're faced with a surprise fake Matt Damon, who, upon learning like his brothers are dead, like just bursts down in tears and then has a breakdown. Um, and that kind of gives Tom Hanks another chance to like break the news a bit better and to like prepare himself for it. But Matt Damon's just like, okay, like he takes a minute, he thinks about it, but then he's like, I'm not going. We have to hold this bridge, damn it. I'm not leaving my brothers. You can tell my mother that, I am staying with the only other brothers I have left. Because at this point, he spent, his whole life growing up with, his family. But I'm sure the past few months of fighting combat in France have been a lifetime in his mind.
Yeah, I mean, especially given that he, like dropped in with the airborne, that was such a mess. Like, if we talk about Normandy being a mess, the airborne drop was an even bigger mess. And like being separated from your troop too, and like everybody, we talk about the camaraderie of, like being dropped on the beach in Normandy. Like chances are, you were generally with your group.
Hmm.
For the drop, it was very scattered and very all over the place and very dangerous because like many people died, just en masse in plane crashes and that kind of thing. So like he would have had to form new bonds with new people, and this is all about trauma bonding too, like we can get into trauma bonding, but that's all this is. So he like has a new family and a new, and I think he even says that like these are the only brothers that I have left.
Hmm.
And I think that that's, it's a powerful statement. And, retrospectively, we can look back on this psychologically and be like, well, he is now trauma bonded with these people and, he doesn't want to leave them, despite his best interests. And, like for the good of the bridge, it's good for the bridge. But, for him living a nice, long, happy life, maybe not the best decision. And
No.
making his mama happy.
Yeah, that's a big part of it because that's what the movie was spawned off of is because in one day his mother would have gotten what I think they said three telegrams of her children dying, which is an absolutely horrible thing.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm glad they went out to her house, didn't send the telegrams.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's the least the industrial military complex can do. Uh,
yeah. But
so
to be fair, this was a particularly tight time and budgets and time and all that
yeah,
jazz.
yeah, sure. Um, So we have throughout this movie, which I think is very well paced, we have a lot of ups and downs in terms of
Hmm.
like the intensity. We have, the scene on the beach, them sitting around talking, getting the mission, doing the debrief, going to Matt Damon's mom. We have them moving around, going through different like battlefields with lulls. They take a nap in a church for a bit, and it's building up to, a big climactic battle. And this battle never happened in history. This was one kind of created for the movie, but created well enough, and is very entertaining.
Yeah, yeah, and it they walk us through some like, you know, fun, I don't want to say hijinks, but like, they do some hood stuff to make these sticky bombs and like set up these traps and try to funnel the Germans this way and that way, in order to use a smaller amount of people to do more.
Yeah, they almost get into like the point of, being a like guerrilla force of,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
what I was going for.
yeah,
Couldn't grasp that word.
yeah. Because at this point, is battalion the right word?
I mean they're like a troop, I think.
Okay. Well, so a Panzer division, so a bunch of tanks and artillery and what I think they said like 50 infantrymen march on them, and there are like maybe a dozen guys on America's side. And in any other movie, and any other action movie, it would have been like a triumphant epic scene of the Americans just taking all of them down. But it's
Hmm.
in here it's played a lot more realistic of every bullet counts, always chucking the grenades back. Any misstep could cause a death on their side, which does happen several times. Um,
Hmm.
and when somebody's gone, they're gone. It's not taking a minute to mourn the dead. You don't have time for that. Don't have
Hmm.
time for the last minute heart to heart.
Yeah, no, there is absolutely no time for that, and people are left where they are. You just kind of have to move on and keep retreating and keep going back to the bridge and just keep moving. And when you don't move, you get stuck, and that's definitely something that happens. People get trapped in places. My favorite character in this thing that we haven't talked about is the sniper guy. Um,
Yes, a religious sniper man who goes up in the church.
yeah, yeah. And I like the way that they filmed his activities. I think they did a really good job, especially the scene earlier on when he shoots the guy who's in a tower. Um, that's a really good scene because the guy who's in the tower is like looking and trying to see, you know, um, looking and looking, and then just as he sees our sniper guy, he gets shot in the face.
Yeah, it's just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, just a great shot, great filmography, great idea,
So, so,
solid, 10 out of
so
10.
one of the things that makes a lot of the shots in this film really impactful and like immersive is a really good word for it, is their use of our friend the steady cam, which we introduced last episode. Um,
Yeah.
so Steven Spielberg didn't do any like storyboarding for this movie, which for how big and epic and scale it is really impressive.
Yeah.
To just go at every scene without having much of a plan, but they were able to use steady cams and smaller like handheld cameras to get right up into the action, to have a lot of the close-ups, to be able to make it feel like you're crouching down in the crater with the guys as they're
Hmm.
being bombarded.
Well, and I think it's important to like understand that this movie is not like The Shining. Not all of the, like the frames of the movie are, artistically presented. It's
Right.
way more gritty than that. It's way more, hey, you would look good from this angle with that thing in the background. Cool, let's shoot it. And it's way more about the emotion and the action than, framing a scene in a certain
Yeah.
way.
Especially in the last battle, I had a hard time keeping track of where everyone was.
Yeah, me too, for sure.
Especially because like half the ruins are, well, half the buildings are in ruins and the other half are rubble. Like it's
Yeah, and it turns out that when you bomb a place, you actually create more places for people to hide.
yeah, that's a good point. Because their main strategy is like trying to block a path by just downing one tank in the middle of the road because the rest of it's full of rubble. Like it's a simple idea. Um,
Hmm.
and it's very much in that, guerrilla idea of using the terrain to your advantage. Um,
Yeah. And it certainly made me sad watching it, like seeing all the like destroyed old buildings and churches and like,
yeah,
you know.
so I said that this was a fake battle, this was a fake fight, but this is something that happened all over the continent.
Hmm.
Um, all
Absolutely.
all the villages, just destroyed and bombed.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm such a big fan of brutalist architecture. I was sad that they, destroyed all the big concrete bunkers on the beach too, because those were pretty cool also,
Yeah, they
even
do
if
have
they
a
were
cool
bad
look
full
to
of
them.
bad people.
Yes. Well, when in that scene and in a couple scenes in this part, they're throwing like fire and like explosives, and I think it looks way too real. Like it looks like they really set some fucking people on fire.
It does. It really does. But they do have the technology to do that semi-safely, because they have the
Yes.
suits and stuff. Like, like setting somebody on fire for stunt is, more of an earlier, not special effect.
Yeah. And especially at this point in Steven Spielberg's career, he probably had a retinue of people who would uh be the special effects masters in this regard.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and plenty of people would have volunteered for that too.
oh
Like,
yeah.
oh, I'm gonna set myself on fire and jump out that window. Cool. Um, yeah, don't do that, people. But
No, no, only if you're trained.
yeah,
Even then, think twice. Yeah, I didn't read about any on-set accidents or disasters, so that's good. That's good for this
yeah,
one.
yeah. That's really good, really positive, especially because like,
The the last few movies we've had were full of them.
yeah. Well, and also this would be an easy one to get hurt on.
And then
You know,
nobody would know because they think, oh, that guy's just screaming because he's in character.
right, yeah. And I mean like, like they did use real boats. They did like get out of the boats, like there are a lot of like actual I mean just you could just trip over, some tank parts in some of these scenes.
Oh yeah, I think there's a scene where somebody like slides down a pile of bricks, and I'm like, well, that looked uncomfortable. Like,
Mm-hmm. The sets are not OSHA compliant.
I do, however, think the scene where Tom Hanks is trying to have coffee from the espresso machine was just something they shot at the craft services table.
Yeah. Yeah, they could have just yeah. That felt very craft servicey and also very unnecessary because like at this point in the war, why would he think that there would actually be coffee in that thing? I'm not sure.
So I was thinking that it was one of those like establishing shots that was like, okay, this is going to be a thing that comes back and like helps them later because it's like this big shiny thing. I was like, oh, he's going to be in that room, look at it, see someone coming in the door and like blow their head off. But it's like, no,
Mm,
that doesn't come back at all. It's just
no.
it's just Tom Hanks failing to make a coffee.
But it is in that kind of one of the lulls of the movie where you need like a little bit of comic
Yeah,
relief and it's also showing that he's struggling with his hand. Um
it still does a lot. It still adds to the movie. I'm not saying it doesn't,
Yeah, I
but
mean, there's a reason they kept it in, but they
yeah.
also could have taken it out and I wouldn't have noticed.
Yeah, there are a couple scenes in that lull before this battle that's like them listening to music, them telling suggestive stories that is just like like I think one of them needed to go. Like there was a
Yeah,
bit too much of the lull. But
but I mean, I think that, especially if you're seeing this in the theaters, like you've been through a lot by that point. And yeah, I mean, A, it's a great time to go to the bathroom, but B, which is what I did. So I don't really, there's a part that there are some parts in this section that I'm like, I don't really remember what happened there. So,
you
um,
were watching this at home with the TV remote.
yeah,
You can hit the pause button.
yeah, but I mean, like 2 hours and 15 minutes in, you're like, I got stuff to do later.
And
I had a time
audiences,
crunch, Garrett.
audience, this is why we're not going to go see Killers of the Flower Moon, because neither of us can sit down for 3 hours.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, there
Oppenheimer was pushing it.
yeah, there's a combination of bladder size and ADHD that is not going to allow us to watch Killers of the Flower Moon in theaters.
No, but
um
Napoleon will get through it because they have costumes and stuff.
yeah,
Uh,
but Killers of the Flower Moon has costumes too.
yeah, but they're not French costumes.
They are not French costumes, and I am
No.
excited for some French costumes. And it'd be a great time to eat the Sour Patch Kids too, because you're biting off their heads, and like the
I see.
guillotine.
I
Yeah.
see.
Anyway, um, but I agree. The lull at this point in the movie is necessary, and it's also building, and it's also like our last moments to gain sympathy for these characters, and some of them we haven't spent as much time with as
Right.
others. So like, we're like gaining these things so that we can remember them, remember their facial features, remember what they look like as they go into this final battle.
Yeah.
And here's the point of the movie where Caitlin complains that everybody's wearing the same thing, but they also did do a really good job of picking actors that looked, had sufficient facial characteristics that were different, that I could follow them individually through the movie and not get confused.
Right.
So
Right.
casting, thumbs up for sure. Things Caitlin likes.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about this problem a number of times, and I think the lulls help you get in with the characters before. And in many movies, when there's the final battle, you expect one of these people are gonna die.
Yeah.
In this
Do you
one,
expect all of them to die?
yeah, yeah. Do you? They do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is sad, but then the airplanes come and save the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which leads me to one of the questions I have about this movie, because I'm not quite sure I have a stance on it either way, but it's like, was Tom Hanks making all the right decisions? Could this have gone better? And I'm sure that's something that he makes mention earlier in the film of, like, talking about, well, do the lives I save justify the lives I've killed, kind of thing. But we don't think about that too much because America, we've lost a lot of lives. Um,
Yeah. I
and
mean, it's a rough question because, like, and also we as the audience don't have enough information to really understand like how important is this bridge.
yeah,
Like them going in and killing that, like gaining control of that turret situation. I don't even know what it called. The bunker, whatever. The thing on the beach they needed to get control of.
yeah,
That was important. And we understood as the viewer that if they don't get that, then the tanks can't land on the beach, blah, 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 we lose. Um, so like that's really well established. If
this
we
one
can't find
had yeah,
or
this
go
one
on.
had a much, like, grander idea of this is a stepping stone to get to Paris, which satisfied a lot of the characters in wanting to continue the war and not just go bumbling around France looking for Matt Damon.
Hmm. Yeah, because there's certainly, as soon as they survive the beach and the airdrops and stuff, the next goal is Paris. Get to Paris, we're going to be fine. If we get to Paris, the war will be over. Which, wrong. But, good thinking. Um, and so yeah, the protecting the bridge is important for morale and all of that. And you know, whether it's true or not, Tom Hanks and the other guy that was in charge and all the people agreed that they needed to protect the bridge.
Yeah.
And they laid down their lives to do it with this silly little plan, and they did it. And Matt
Yes.
Damon lives.
Yes. And Matt Damon lives. And the film is bookended by a very old Matt Damon going to a national cemetery. I think that they actually go to one that's in France, like it's a real one, um, to go and see the grave of Tom Hanks's character. I think those scenes with him and his family are really excellent to like denote the cost of war. That
Hmm.
like, you know, Matt Damon lives and he has this family, he has like children and looks like he has grandchildren. Like there are like a half dozen people with him. Every single one of those graves could have been, you know, a half dozen other people over
Hmm.
the next 60, 70 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I especially liked the question of, was I a good person? Am I a good man? Because I think that that's the question that we were just asking about Tom Hanks
Yeah,
is, did he make the right decisions? And like Matt Damon looking back on his life, like did I do it? Did I do enough to make everyone's sacrifice worth it?
right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful question that no doubt tons of people who've been in this situation have asked themselves. And it's one that like is very difficult to answer. It's a very philosophical one because it comes down to, you know, the Machiavellian idea of do the ends justify the means?
Hmm.
And you know, even in today's world, we have a hard time answering that one because most issues are not black and white. Certainly, looking through like the lens of historical context, the ends justify the means here because we ended a horrible fascist state. But in every instance, you know, if you
Yeah,
looked at
but I
everything with
mean,
a fine tooth comb, it would get very murky.
yeah, I mean, if you say like the result of World War II is that we ended a fascist state, we also created two more.
Yeah,
So, like there's pros and cons there. And we also, destroyed the cultural uh legacy of two countries. We
at
we
least.
destroyed, you know, um large portions of France, untold art, people's lives, women and children, crops, beaches, ecology, some barns, probably some cool trees.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's all
Well,
I got on that one.
well, what did we learn? So I've put up a picture here of a video game. I know you're not a video game, but I do video game. And shortly after this film was released, Steven Spielberg and DreamWorks, who produced this, went on to make a companion piece, which was a video game called Medal of Honor. The series is one of the like higher selling video game series of all time, with nearly 40 million sales across its many video games. And this was the video game that started popularizing World War II in video games. And that went on to spawn Call of Duties and stuff. It's also one of the stepping stones that the U.S. military has used to launch their own video games and do lots of recruitments with esports and you know, video game merch giveaways and other shit. You know, it's led to them doing lots of ads and social media and other online presence in this gaming space because they think, dudes like playing video games where they fight each other with historical accuracy. Maybe they want to go fight a war. So thanks, Steven Spielberg. You've done a good.
Yeah, yeah. I
In
mean, yeah.
in many ways, this film went and gave like not necessarily glory and heroicism to war, but like ignited something in patriotism where we stopped looking so necessarily at like Vietnam and started looking at America's success in World War II. And if you you know, were a part of the American school system, you're fed this idea that America are the ones that won the wars, both of them, because you know that's the propaganda machine that we're fed, which
Yeah,
is in no way, shape, or form true at all. You
right.
know,
Back to back World War victors.
in war we're all losers,
Indeed.
and this film perpetuates that. But it there's there's kind of no good way to go about telling the real story. It would be far more horrifying than even the worst moments in this.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's such an interesting point because, everybody dies except Matt Damon. So everybody loses. Everybody loses except Matt Damon. So, but it's still like idolized,
mhm.
and yeah, it's pretty gross in the grand scheme of things. And why is it? Is it the camaraderie? Is it the rah rah rah? Is it the nationalism? Is it the, you know, and they don't even hammer home this idea that Nazis are bad and like blah
No,
blah
not at
blah.
all. They don't say that word, I think, at all in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Just
Um,
Germans. They call them Germans.
yeah, it's
So
it's it's such a weird thing because we don't have that like overt imagery, and we don't have the like call to action of like defeating fascism or anything. It's just the war. And perhaps that's what like made it so popular. What was that there was still like a level of ambiguity to it.
yeah, that could be. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting and kind of like bizarre end that we come to, because you're not sad at the end. You're happy for Matt Damon, and you're happy that we did it. And I think that's it, is because we as a viewer who's following along with
Yes.
the team, we
We
uh,
accomplished our goal and then some.
yeah, yeah, mission accomplished. And there's a lot of irony in that.
Yeah, mission accomplished, lives lost, most of them.
Yeah, which is the whole movie. And it's so interesting that like the viewer gets a positive perspective out of it at the end. And I mean, like, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with you.
I think it's interesting too that, like as I said earlier in the film, like, or in the podcast, I have become much more like grossed out by the violence as time goes on. And I wonder like how much of that has to do also with like being grossed out with the idea of war and the idea of, these conflicts and how useless they are, and how, all of these people die for nothing. And I think that, like they say that war is a young man's sport,
Hmm.
and I think that's also something that's on display in this movie, is that Tom Hanks is kind of this like tired teacher, and he's older, and he's, like trying to wrangle these men who have so much energy toward, and to like maneuver it into the right direction. But he also has his own anger and his own feelings, you know, as the film progresses, and he sees all of it, and he gets the shell shock just as much as anybody else.
Yeah, it certainly
Yeah.
helps having the film told through his perspective.
Hmm. Yeah, especially as that kind of like dad figure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good film. I enjoyed it a lot. I think there's a lot to work through mentally, especially in 2023, where we're at. Looking back on that kind of war, we're unlikely to ever be involved in anything like that again, because technology has changed so rapidly. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why people are drawn to World War II and World War One and even farther back, because the technology is a lot more accessible and understandable. And we can understand, oh, they have these rifles, but they have to put them in baggies so that they don't get sand in them when they storm the beach.
Yeah.
That's something accessible and understandable to us, the viewer. Whereas, however a drone works,
Well,
as we learned in Interstellar, we don't know.
yeah, it's also so much more intimate of fighting combat, and therefore more immersive than,
Hmm.
the guy in the headquarters using an Xbox controller to control the drone that kills indiscriminately.
Hmm. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I think Dune uses hand-to-hand combat, because it is a much more accessible understanding of, you know, combat for the viewer.
And it's that like full circle of going around to like, well, we've come up with defenses for, literally all of these like secret and kind of unfair technologies. Now we're going back to swords and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, let's not forget, swords are the coolest. So,
Oh, absolutely. Swords are awesome. There's one scene in this where there's like some extreme hand-to-hand combat, and it's cool.
it is cool. It is hard to watch though.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I think that's something we'll see in a lot of these films that are depicting real things. Is they're hard to watch because they're real. Because even though
Hmm.
it's an acted thing, that same scene happened 100 times at least.
Right. Well, and I also think that, as, this is 25 years later, there aren't a lot of films that show hand-to-hand combat like that anymore.
Right.
Whatever choreographed nonsense they do in Marvel movies is quite different from this.
Yeah, Tom Hanks didn't have like a rocket-powered gauntlet or anything.
No. But I mean, like, even without the superhero like stuff, the
Right.
the kinds of hand-to-hand combat that they do now is just totally different. And
A
I think
lot more
it
flashy.
yeah, it's flashy, and I think it borrows a lot more from martial arts kind of stuff, that, it has its own like stuff to it. Like, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about like the martial arts that's in like Kill Bill is phenomenal, and I love that, but it's totally different. It's artsy. It's not visceral and real in the same way.
Right, right. Yeah, I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
Yes, so that's Saving Private Ryan, a really good movie that opened up a whole new wave of war content. Really set the stage to be able to let filmmakers create something a lot more real and realistic. Kind of changed the way we as casual moviegoers viewed these sort of experiences, from going from, a really heroic idea of Steve McQueen escaping the clutches of evil on a motorcycle to people getting blown apart and still living. It's bleak, it's interesting, but ends pretty hopefully,
yeah.
and really reminds us what we were fighting for the whole time, which is to go home and have some corn.
Yeah, yeah, we did this for corn on the cob.
Yes.
Buttered, salted corn on the cob, maybe a few tomato slices. Yeah.
Yeah, let's not forget about, all the freedom, which is the freedom to consume corn however you want to eat it.
Yeah, and Jello salad too. Don't forget the
Yes,
Jello salad. The
yes.
freedom for the Jello salad.
Matt Damon would have came home, had corn on the cob, and then the newly created Jello salads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's preservative.
Was I a good man? Yes, you were, Matt Damon. You suffered through 20 years of Jello salad.
Mm-hmm. The evolution throughout the 50s and 60s of the Jello salad was enormous.
Well, we want to thank you all for watching. There was a lot more views and stuff on our last episode, which was pretty cool. Uh, Probably this one will perform similarly, as we continue to gain traction, and have found our voice over these last 18 episodes.
Yeah, so thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below with your favorite World War II facts. I love World War II facts. They're super fun. Um, and your favorite war movies. We do want to cover a wide variety of war movies for our War on Christmas, fall, or winter season. I don't even know. What is November and December called as a group? I don't know.
Well,
It's a War on Christmas season.
they're fall, but they don't feel like fall.
No, they don't, because today was very cold. Tomorrow, it might be 70. So who knows
Yeah. Well,
what our weather is doing. Global warming is great.
yes. Another fine gift from the industrial military complex.
Yeah, it is probably their fault, isn't it? Oh my
Yep.
God. Yeah.
And on that note, I'll thank you all for sticking with us. Uh, join us next time, please.
Talk to you next week. Bye.